Good afternoon. Bonjour. I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for joining the Paralegals and Access to Justice session today. This event is part of Ontario's second annual Access to Justice Week, which is organized by the Law Society's Action Group on Access to Justice in partnership with 12 other organizations. My name is Cathy Corsetti. I'm a judge of the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. You may wonder why I'm here introducing this program to you. I was the Director of Policy here at the Law Society when the regulation of paralegals began to be discussed by the benchers in earnest. My department developed the framework of paralegal regulation that was ultimately presented to and adopted by the Attorney General of Ontario to make paralegal regulation a reality. It is an achievement of which I am very proud, and I am delighted to be here with you today. We are here together in Toronto, which is a Mohawk word that means where there are trees standing in the water. I want to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit First Nation. I also want to acknowledge the Haudenosaunee and recognize the long history of all of the First Nations in Ontario and the Métis and Inuit peoples. We thank the First Nations people who lived and live in these lands for sharing them with us in peace. Access to Justice Week is a great opportunity to showcase and raise awareness of paralegals as champions for access to justice. I'm pleased to see such interest in today's event, both in this room and from those joining us by webcast. We are in the middle of Access to Justice Week, which, as I said, is organized by the Law Society's Action Group on Access to Justice, or TAG as it is known. This group was established by the Law Society in 2015. With funding from the Law Foundation of Ontario and the Law Society, it facilitates better coordination and collaboration across the justice sector in Ontario. It advances important conversations about access to justice issues and supports the development of meaningful solutions. Our partners for today's event are the Ontario Paralegal Association, Durham College, and the Durham Community Legal Clinic. Today's event has been accredited for 2 professionalism hours. I also want to direct your attention to a table that has been set up outside of this room by the Law Society's Coach and Advisor Network. CAN, as it is known, assists lawyers and paralegals by connecting them with senior members of the professions to assist them with specific problems or issues that they may be grappling with in their practices. This is a very valuable service. I encourage you to stop by the CAN table or check them out on the Law Society's website for more information. Now, for our keynote speaker, Stephanie Ball. Stephanie is the Executive Dean of the School of Justice and Emergency Services and School of Interdisciplinary Studies at Durham College. Stephanie is going to tell you about an innovative hub-based initiative that centers around paralegals enhancing access to justice in the Durham region. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie.
Thank you for that lovely introduction. I'm so very pleased to be invited to speak on how paralegals at Durham College can increase access to justice in my community, which is Durham Region. I would like to acknowledge and thank the Action Group on Access to Justice and the Law Society for hosting this session and raising the profile of this very significant issue. The School of Justice and Emergency Services within Durham College is in the planning stages of a 5-year pilot project, which we are referring to as the Access to Justice Hub, and which I will refer to throughout this presentation as the Hub. This presentation will briefly outline this project. So the presentation agenda is set out, and it indicates what the key topics are that I will cover during this presentation. So we will take you through the needs assessment, to the mission statement, then right through to how we're going to measure the performance of this hub pilot and the status of the project to date. Our needs assessment is based on information and observations of those in the various social and legal fields. As you know, many residents find it challenging to understand and navigate legal and social systems. Challenges come from a couple of areas. One, the fact that there is not usually just one problem to solve. It's usually one of a number, such as defaulting on a rent payment due to not receiving an expected WSIB check. So now you have two problems, both of which are very serious to one's well-being. So multifaceted problems require a multidimensional approach to the problem solving. The second area of challenge comes from the existence of barriers. So these barriers may be language, low literacy, disability, lack of access to basic essentials like a phone or internet, lack of transportation. And just as the problems are multiplied, so often are the barriers. So there's not always just one barrier, there may be a number of them. So the existence of these challenges often leads to the inability to access legal representation, resulting in the increased number of self-represented litigants. And I'm sure many of you are aware that that in itself can cause a lot of challenges for our justice system through the tribunals and the courts in terms of delays, additional expense, and additional time spent. So to address these identified needs, a group of interested colleagues in Durham Region began a discussion which led to the concept of a hub. So our next step was to draft a mission statement as to what we wanted to accomplish. So our goal is really to collaborate with community agencies, and it's interesting that the word collaboration was used in the introduction. Although all justice areas and legal fields may collaborate, we're extending that beyond that to collaborate with community agencies who serve the same clientele that we do. So to collaborate with community agencies to create an access to justice hub, which provides services and system navigation to low-income and precariously employed residents to assist them with accessing benefits and entitlements. So this mission statement addresses the previously identified needs. So I want to note at this point that it's anticipated that the cohort of residents who gap out for any type of subsidy assistance will continue to grow and in fact become the norm. This group is often referred to as the working poor or the precariously employed. The notion of precariousness has been examined, studied, and defined in a number of different ways, including in a paper by the Law Commission of Ontario, where it addressed what it meant by precarious work and vulnerable workers. When referred to in this presentation, I am addressing situations where a worker may have low or irregular wages, no benefits with those wages, and possibly minimal statutory protections. In effect, the income is usually not enough to support a household. It is this demographic which will benefit most from the hub. So the vision for our hub is to provide a number of different things, and the key goals to be met are, first of all, access. So the first point indicates we want an accessible central location for legal and social service agencies to provide wraparound services to low-income and precariously employed residents. This will help with filling the gaps in services left by the eligibility criteria for legal services, which I'm sure we all know are quite minimal. The second point is to address the gaps in service. The third is to provide educational opportunities, and these will be dealt with a little bit later in the program, but really they will address education for our paralegals as well as educational opportunities for our residents and clients. And lastly, to conduct research so that we can better serve the needs of our lower income demographic. It's really important to be able to quantify what is needed and to do so with verifiable data. And that's one of the areas which we plan on exploring. So like any organization, we sat down and looked at what type of values we would bring to the table as a group. And the values set out are on the slide. The collective responsibility that we have to take care of one another in our community, the empowerment of clients to be self-sufficient. And you'll note I put this one in italics because I think it's really key to our paralegal education, because it's important for us to teach our students to be socially responsible members of society. And I'll be dwelling on that a little bit later as well. I think we already know the value of working with community partnerships, and we always have to acknowledge the importance of being cost efficient and effective, and using evidence-based research to inform our local or whatever planning we may be involved in. So many of these values may appear to be self-evident, but it's important to establish them at the outset of any project. These values will be touched upon as I hit each topic as we move through the rest of the presentation. So you're probably wondering what this hub framework is going to be. What is it going to look like? So the cornerstone for us is the Durham Community Legal Clinic, which is the legal clinic which serves all of Durham region, which consists of a number of different areas within the region. As many of you know, I'm sure, the community legal clinics generally provide a lot of service to this demographic in areas of ODSP, Ontario Works, WSIB, EI, and a whole list of items I've listed, as well as more. So like all funded agencies, there are some limits to what can be provided based more upon what the capacity of the legal clinic is and in terms of what they may be funded for in terms of staffing. So the hub will provide additional opportunities for students, paralegal students, within an expanded clinic practice, including, in the case of Durham Region, representation of clients in small claims court and provincial offences courts. These are two areas which are not provided right now by the Durham Community Legal Clinic, just due to a shortage of available staff to be able to do that. So they may provide preliminary advice and direction, but cannot actually attend in court to represent the clients. So services that will be offered to the clients will be offered to those who may not meet the traditional clinic requirements. So again, referring back to the precarious workforce. And of note, students, of course, would be supervised by legal clinic staff and additional experts. And when I say additional experts, I don't mean that the clinic staff aren't experts. It's just that they don't address provincial offences right now. So we would bring in someone who is an expert in provincial offences to make sure that students practicing in that area would have appropriate direction and supervision. So the framework that we envision has the Durham Community Legal Clinic as the cornerstone, as I've said. That is run by an executive director. And actually, at this point, the only part that it will remain the same is the part that says clinic staff. The rest is all relatively new. So where I've put the frame for the legal supervisor, this is the person who would be responsible for supervising the 10 to 15 paralegal students who would cycle through the clinic each semester. So that legal supervisor may not be one person. It may be a combination of people depending on the areas of practice that are going to be covered. So with respect to the next bar over from clinic staff, the immigration project, this is a project that's actually ongoing right now. And actually we're looking at this as being the template for our hub project. The immigration project has been going for about 3 years right now. One of my colleagues who will be speaking later, Laurie Marshall, is actually the staff person at the clinic who is responsible for sponsoring a student, a field placement student at the clinic to do immigration work. This is another area that the clinic did not have the capacity to expand to. So Laurie Marshall, who's a professor at Durham College, has taken that responsibility on to enhance the opportunities for our students. And I think probably 8 or 9 students have cycled through that placement now. So for those of you who are in the education field, you'll know that all students have different goals when they graduate and different fields they are interested in. So we've been really happy to be able to offer this opportunity to students who are interested in the immigration field. So the last branch, I've put mediation supervisor. So we offer a graduate certificate program at Durham College in mediation alternative dispute resolution. So a graduate certificate means that the students will have come to the program after taking a diploma or a degree in some other particular field. So the plan for the hub is to also have a placement opportunity for those students to work in this environment. So those students wouldn't be there every day of the week, probably 1 to 2 days of the week, but then they would have opportunities to interact with clinic staff, social service agency staff, and see what opportunities might present themselves from that interaction. So moving on to the role of the paralegal students. Students currently participate in our paralegal programs in the second year as part of their diploma program, and for our graduate certificate students in the paralegal program at the end of their program. What this hub envisions is that 1 semester of their program, 14 weeks, will be a placement at the Durham Community Legal Clinic. So they will attend, work, and study at the clinic full-time. They will enroll and complete a clinic practice course. So for those of you who have worked in clinics before, you know that there are certain requirements, basically based on funding in terms of gathering statistics and paper tracking of clients. So those are the sorts of things that students would have to learn about in this clinic practice course, which would be offered right at the front end of their placement so that they would then be able to blend in with the rest of the staff at the clinic. They would also at the same time continue with some of their courses in their program. We anticipate a course load of three courses would be enough, so that's basically about 9 hours a week. And it would be our plan to offer those courses while they're at the clinic through the Global Classroom at Durham College. How many people in the audience have attended a session through the Global Classroom? Maybe just one or just a few? Okay. So right now, we're offering at Durham College the opportunity for people to participate throughout the world at different opportunities at Durham, whether it's a seminar, a workshop, or a class. And it's actually embedded into some of our classes, like the Global History class, for example. So we're moving this classroom into a brand new building next year, and one of our goals will be to maximize the use of it for, it doesn't matter if the students are in Australia or whatever. We should be able to connect them from downtown Oshawa to North Oshawa, so that's going to be our goal for this. It will also be used to provide other opportunities for education for students, but the plan would be for them to be able to keep up with some of their program requirements while they're at this placement, but still stay at the placement. So it really will be a fully embedded experience for them. So I think I've already mentioned that we would staff the clinic for the full year. So we currently have a January intake of our paralegal program. So we anticipate a different cohort of students each semester of the year. This is really important for the legal clinic because if there's a 4-month gap in the services that are provided, it tends to disrupt the normal flow of clinic work and the expectations of clients. So this way, students will learn what it's like to pass on a client when you're finished your semester. So we do have the capability now to be able to staff that for the full year. And we think that's really important. Of course, all services would be provided under supervision of licensed professionals. And the students attending would be expected to perform all the normal functions that clinic staff would perform and be an added benefit to the staff. They're not there to be only as a student to learn. They're there to help, contribute, and add to their statistics, I would say. So the role of the mediation students is basically the same, only on a slightly reduced scale, mainly because there isn't quite the demand for mediation services at this point as there is for paralegal services. So this program, as I indicated, would be 1 to 2 days a week under the supervision of a practicing mediator, and would expose students, not only in the mediation program, but also in the paralegal program, to the different ways of resolving disputes prior to heading into a tribunal or a court. So I think I indicated earlier that this is one of the benefits that we see, is the ability to strategize on how these clients can resolve issues and problems without necessarily having to go the full route to an adjudication, whether it's in a court or a tribunal. So circling back to our initial goal of improving access to justice, I will address the multiple benefits of this type of structure. So as noted earlier, the expansion of services is in response to a growing cohort of the workforce, the working poor and the precariously employed. So they will be served by having expanded areas of service to many more residents than currently would qualify, by having actual representation available. And I've used small claims court and provincial offences court. There may be others, but that is our target initially for the first year, because it's been a gap that's been identified. Addressing the people who fall within that gap because of the eligibility criteria that's currently in place. And in summary, we're really looking at additional areas of representation, more residents eligible for services, actual representation being available, and we feel that all of those items will improve the access to justice. Societal benefits. So on a broader scale, we're really looking at how we can empower our clients and residents to obtain both income and other benefits to which they are entitled but may be unaware of. Assistance, we hope, will lead to homeless prevention, poverty reduction, and improved physical and mental health. Now, poverty reduction is always a noble goal and probably unachievable in most of our lifetimes, but it doesn't mean that we can't take some steps to address that and try and reach out to the people that we know could benefit from this type of service. So even if it's a small step towards increased financial security at a very modest level, it will certainly help residents plan their futures and hopefully put them on a path to more economic stability. We also know that having at least a stable type of lifestyle is an important bridge to employment and will give people the skills and the opportunities to be able to access that. Removing barriers for clients and residents will lead to greater independence and greater awareness of opportunities that they may have. So again, this is focused on the collaboration with other agencies who provide those benefits, so that the paralegals in the clinic would work with those agencies to learn about their processes, help clients access them, whether it's filling out paperwork, just making the connection, whatever. Every client may have a different level of need, and that need can be met by paralegals who are hired to do that. So in essence, we're trying to build a continuum of supports to try to prevent poverty and thereby contribute to the income stability of residents generally. So one of the other benefits is educational. So paralegal students will learn in an authentic supervised workplace. They can apply their program knowledge and essential employability skills, preparing them for the workforce. We'll create socially aware legal professionals. And then aside from the students, we will also be able to provide on-site classroom connection through the global classroom for our residents, for other professionals who want continuing professional development, to the legal clinic, to other agency staff. It really will be an educational hub where topics of critical importance to a number of agencies can be dealt with by the community itself. So it won't be just targeted to one particular group. There'll be a number of different agencies there. So for residents, knowledge is power. And to have this opportunity to be informed of their rights, their entitlements, and other related issues at an accessible location will hopefully assist and empower them to take the next step towards their future. By providing this educational opportunity for students, we're growing the community of concerned professionals by exposing students to challenges faced by marginalized populations. We also envision the Hub as being a bit of a research center. So ongoing collection of data from client tracking creates the ability to improve planning, programming, and deployment of services at a local and regional level. With respect to paralegals, it may lead us to providing a different area of service than we're already providing. We may find nobody wants small claims court. Okay, then what do they want and what can we do? So the tracking of statistics will really help for future planning, not only for agencies and for poverty reduction groups, but also for the clinic itself in addressing what types of services it wants to provide. In Durham Region, one of the benefits of tracking is to assist in the identification of services required for priority neighborhoods. So our region right now has identified a number of priority neighborhoods which need more of everything we have in terms of servicing than other areas within the region. So where our hub is going to be located is actually within walking distance of 4 of those already identified priority neighborhoods within Durham Region. So it also supports the financial empowerment framework within Durham Region. I don't think we're unique in Durham Region. It's just that that's what we call it. That's what the social service agencies are working on to make sure that we're addressing the needs of our region. So the collaboration between the 3 partners will enable the effective use of resources to targeted areas of need. And then we'll determine the need for further research. Are there other areas we should be looking at for service to clients? Research is a really high priority for Durham College right now, and I think it is for most post-secondary educational institutions. We as educators realize the value of informing our students and our students informing themselves by research, by data collection, of what the needs are in the community that we can reach out and attempt to fill. So this project fits well within a lot of the social service types of grants, and I'll move on to those in a minute, but those are funds that we're trying to access for funding to support this. So, speaking of funding, being fiscally responsible is a necessity when developing any initiatives to serve people in the social justice sector. There is just never enough money to meet the needs, no matter how well documented those needs might be. It's therefore incumbent upon us to be creative in how we meet these needs, in developing entities which will address them, which will utilize resources we already have, and expand upon them and modernize them to meet evolving challenges. And we think the Hub is an example of how to do this. So the Hub builds on an existing model. So the model in place for the delivery of legal services is, as I've indicated earlier, the Durham Community Legal Clinic. It's fiscally responsible because paralegal and mediation students provide their services at no cost. As long as you don't count the costs of attending school as part of the cost. This is part of the expectation of their program and their graduation. They need to obtain field placement hours. Now, this would be what many would describe as well in excess of what the requirements are for a paralegal field placement, but it comes at with great benefits and a small cost. The courses may have to be made up at will have to be made up at some other time. But the model itself is sound because it uses resources that we already have in place to meet those ongoing needs. So the expansion of the legal services, so it's great having that already well-run structure in place that we can build upon. So with employment and mediation alternative dispute resolution techniques, what that does also is expand to areas that are current now and are expected in most tribunals and courts. These processes are a benefit in terms of being able to hopefully reduce wait times for courts, resolving issues before they get to court, and obviously saving time and resources to staff, tribunals, and courts if those matters are not resolved. So not only do we save money in terms of setting up the structure, but hopefully we will save money for the province in addressing a lot of those needs ahead of time. So I now want to address briefly performance measures. So with any project that we implement at Durham, and I'm sure this applies everywhere else, we need to have some performance measures to see if we've been successful in achieving what we want with this hub. So this is advisedly a 5-year pilot. At Durham, we often do 1-year pilots, sometimes 6 months, sometimes 2 years. But with the type of commitment that is required for this, we thought 5 years would be a reasonable time period to see whether or not it was making a difference or not. So these are the types of items that we will track to be able to evaluate. So statistical data primarily, number of students, number of hours, operating hours that the clinic serve. Now this may be self-evident to most, like it may be a 9 to 5, but we may expand into weekends or evenings because with students you have that flexibility, right? So that may be a change that we see. Number of clients served, number of court and tribunal appearances, client load carried, and the number of professional development or speaking engagements facilitated for members of the community or other agencies which may attend. So with respect to the performance measures, I also wanted to mention that with respect to the hub, I know I focus mostly on the role of paralegals in the hub because that's what this event is all about. But one of the other factors that we have addressed is the use of other agencies who may not be co-located at the hub, but may cycle in once a week or so. So we may have mental health resources, for example, come in 1 day a week. We may have any other number of agencies, employment insurance folks, CPP folks. So they may come in for a day a week. We will have office space available to them so that they can also access our clients without the clients having to go to them. It's really challenging, as you may know, and depending on where you live, to have clients attend a number of different places and pay the costs of transportation for each of them. So the last thing we're going to track is the paralegal students who complete this placement and follow them into their careers to assess how they achieve their career goals and where they end up. We usually try and do that now, but it's a little challenging. That will be a condition of participating in this project. We need to be able to see what they do with their lives, how they move on, and how social justice becomes something that they are passionate about, they choose to develop their career around, or where it takes them. So we will then be able to track their progress against the graduates we have who have not had the benefit of the clinic placement. So this is kind of exciting, being able to research and track performance. It's something that we do at school normally, so it'll be a really great project for us to undertake in conjunction with our colleagues. So lastly, the status to date. So the good news is we have a location, and location is pretty key to this whole project, because if we can't all be co-located, half of my slides would go out the window because it's really premised on people being in the same place. So right now in Durham Region, Ontario Works Office had to move, and they've moved into a place that has a ton of other space. Durham Community Legal Clinic has to move within the next 18 months because of their lease expiring and them needing more space, and they're in discussions about going to the same location. They have enough room there to accommodate a separate space for our students, so we're looking at that as well. The location was chosen specifically when Ontario Works went there to make it accessible to their clients. So it's on bus routes, as I mentioned earlier, it's within walking distance of 4 of the priority needs neighborhoods of the region. So a great location for us, and it's just one of those situations that kind of happened fortuitously, that's for sure. If we had wanted it to happen, it certainly wouldn't have, but it all sort of came together at the same time. So the location's been established. we've gotten support from provincial and municipal representatives. Now, I'm not naive enough to know that it would be career limiting not to support an initiative like this for most politicians, but our plan is to make it fairly easy for them to work through whatever processes they have to get the support that we need. And one of the things we're doing to encourage that is by the college itself applying for funding through some different funds that are available to us. So again, fortuitously, one came across my desk 2 weeks ago, the Career Ready Fund. So we've applied for that already. It's been submitted, and we're looking for some initial capital costs to be covered and some staffing costs for supervision of staff at the clinic. So this fund is a college and university fund created to support experiential learning initiatives and measurement. And for those of you who are not in the college system, experiential learning is just what this hub provides. Okay, you're right immersed in the experience of adapting what you've learned in school to the workforce. So this fits well within the fund, and we anticipate being successful in achieving those funds. And I think they have to be paid out sometime next year, June of 2018. Okay, so we're also initiating our budgeting process within the college, and I'll be submitting for our school some requests for costs to allow professors like Laurie Marshall to have release time to be able to go down and supervise the activities of the students. So I put down the dates for the soft launch, May of 2018, and the full launch of September 2018, and that's when we hope to be operational. So I'd like to close by saying that paralegal students and paralegals are uniquely positioned to assist with access to justice issues. They have a unique set of skills and a need and a desire to obtain appropriate training for their careers and are anxious to obtain on-the-job experience. One benefit of this comprehensive placement for students is that we will be building an emerging, socially aware workforce with relevant experience, which I believe will serve to create healthy communities in the long term. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Stephanie. That's a wonderful initiative that's providing both access to justice to the people in Durham, but also to the paralegal students. It's wonderful. We look forward to hearing more about it. Now's the time for questions. If anyone has any questions in the audience, you can come up. There's a mic here and a mic there for Stephanie. We're also any on the webcast. If they want to send in a question, I'll be happy to read them out. Anyone? Good.
Hi, my name is Stephen. I'm from the Sheridan Paralegal program. I'm currently in my second year. So my question was that are you worried at all about potential free riders to the fact that you're providing zero cost to the services? Like, are there any ways of weeding out potential free riders to that program?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the question. Can you
Okay.
tell me?
So the services that the students will be performing are free of cost.
Yes.
My question is that, is there a facility in place to catch any free riders, anyone taking the program that they otherwise would be able to fund themselves through other means, just taking advantage of the program?
So I guess, are you taking financial eligibility to any of the clients that might come into the legal clinic? Is that what you're asking?
Is that the question?
Sure.
Okay. Yes. So the services would be provided to that demographic that I mentioned in terms of the working poor or the precariously employed. So it's meant to provide a service to those that fit within that gap. So people that are turned away from legal clinics because they don't meet the financial criteria will now have a place to go, short of having to pay for legal representation, because they won't be able to do that in any event. They cannot afford it.
Okay, thank you. I have a further question, if I may.
Sure.
So my second question is that what would change for those criteria to change as well? I mean, obviously, as you have said, the criteria for legal aid is very limited. Would it be in the best interest of the general population of Ontario in general for that to be loosened in some way?
So I'm not particularly qualified to answer that, actually, but as I said in one of my, in response to one of the slides, that there's never enough money for any issues that involve social justice for anybody. So the guidelines are set by Legal Aid Ontario, which is my understanding, and I'm assuming that they have good information on setting those. Would it help if they were loosened up? I think we could all agree yes. Is that realistic? I don't know, because I'm not part of that organization and wouldn't be qualified to answer that. So this is in response to the fact that no matter what those criteria are, at this point, there's a group of people that are not represented and can't access some of these services.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Hi there. I think it's very exciting to see a model of integrating paralegal training and legal clinics, so congratulations on that. I have a question about the performance measures you've proposed and whether you are also looking at ways to assess client satisfaction or to work with the supervising lawyer to take a look at how the addition of paralegal students into the landscape of the legal clinic assists, what quality, whether or not it leads to future needs or clients coming back for other kinds of issues that perhaps are within the lawyer's mandate.
That's a very good question. And actually, I went over this presentation with 4 of my office staff this morning, and somebody asked that very question. And I said, well, I can't cover everything in this. But based on my prior experience in a legal clinic, I know that you do have to track, and I think you still do, client satisfaction and get feedback from clients. So would that be done? Absolutely. I think it's really key to the success of the project to make sure that clients are getting what we anticipate them getting and what we hope that they'll get. So we will probably use a lot of the tracking mechanisms, forms, they're probably all electronic now, by clinic staff to get the same type of feedback from this group as well. Absolutely, because I think it is key to make sure that what we're providing is successful. That's what we want, so if there are ways we can improve upon it, we need to know that early and often. And students are used to being evaluated, so it'll be nothing new to them.
Hi, my name is Martin Fisher, paralegal student at Sheridan. The question that I had was regarding the placement here is going to be ongoing throughout the year, one of the years that they're studying. They're still going to be required to do a placement after this?
No.
So this is something that the Law Society has already looked at? Because at this point, is from what I understand, we have to finish our course before we can do any placement.
The field placements at Durham are in the second year, so third semester, right? So they will have completed the first 2 semesters before going on placement. So this is really like a placement on steroids. It's a bigger placement. It has more hours, more exposure, more whatever. So we will have no difficulty meeting the requirements of the field placement hours for from the Law Society.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
There's a couple of questions I have from the web. One is, being a graduate in the paralegal program, is there any chance for a paralegal to get this type of hands-on experience in the hub?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. Can you elaborate more on that?
So one of our goals as educators is to always create opportunities for students. So, and that includes graduates and alumni, and we're continually reaching out to alumni from our Durham College programs, and I think that will be addressed a little bit later as well. The unfortunate part is that they wouldn't be getting credit for field placement hours if they'd already graduated. So it sounds to me like we'd be thinking of more of a volunteer placement. And I am sure that that most legal clinics would not turn away the assistance of a graduated paralegal student. to obtain further experience to support their career. I think it's a great idea. And if people don't have full-time jobs at this point, it's a great opportunity to get more experience to hopefully get you on the road to a full-time job.
Your phone's going to be ringing off the hook. I have one
I'm
more.
not as busy right now, so it's okay.
One more question from the web. What is the ratio of mentors, being licensed paralegals, to students that you feel would be most useful or practical in this program? There's a second part to this question. Also, would the mentors be compensated for their time financially or in CPD hours, or would it be considered pro bono?
Oh, those are great ideas, actually. Compensation for CPD hours would be great. I mean, that is something we could explore. But yes, we would provide compensation. It's really not appropriate, I don't think, to have expectations of certain performance by the mentor, faculty supervisor for free. We wouldn't expect that. And payment makes people accountable as well. So the criteria that they would be expected to deliver on in terms of their hours of work, the services they provide, and how they support students would be very clearly delineated. And they would be accountable to both the clinic and to Durham College for that.
So
does that cover that question? I think
the ratio of paralegals, licensed mentors to the students.
Okay, so really what we have is a supervisor. I guess that person can be looked at as a mentor, and really the ratio will depend upon the type of service being provided. So for example, if we have 3 or 4 students doing provincial offences work, they can be adequately supervised by one provincial prosecutor, because they would share in the learning of all and would be in the provincial offences courts together learning. So that's part of what we're trying to do with this clinic, is have a community of learning practice with all of the students, so they would all sort of learn together. So in terms of a fixed ratio, I'm not really sure I would have one. We would make sure there was efficient and effective supervision, whatever that took.
So we have time for a couple more questions, one on the floor and there's one on the web, and then we'll start the rest of our program. Go ahead.
Hi, Denise Ranger, second-year paralegal student at Durham College, currently on placement. I just want to ask a quick question. How do I sign up? When can I start?
May 2018. Thanks for that. It's nice to see so many students here. I know because of the job action that you're not in school right now, and this is a great way to be spending some time, I think, learning about more paralegal issues. So great for you to hear about it and come down here.
So one last question is, and it's a good question, how do the insurance requirements get met during the student's placement? Is there an overseeing licensed paralegal lawyer who those students would fall under their insurance?
Yes, absolutely. So we're really cognizant of our responsibilities as professionals to ensure that. And whenever we have students placed, they're always placed with a licensed professional, and that would continue with respect to this as well.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. So now on to the rest of our program. I'll just give everyone a minute to get seated.
Thank you, Steve.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cathy Corsetti, and I'm a paralegal bencher at the Law Society. Thank you for joining our important discussion on how paralegals facilitate access to justice in their communities. This year marks the 10th anniversary of paralegal regulation. It's an exciting to reach this milestone and consider our next chapter as a profession. That's what we want to explore today with this panel. I'd like to introduce our speakers who bring valuable perspective and expertise on paralegals as access to justice champions. First, Elaine Page of Page Paralegal. Elaine is a passionate supporter of the paralegal profession. She has been practicing in the area of small claims court and landlord and tenant for over 25 years. In 2013, Elaine was honored to be the recipient of the Law Society William J. Simpson Distinguished Paralegal of the Year Award. More recently, Elaine sat on the Justice Boncalo Family Legal Services Review Advisory Committee and is proud to have made a contribution to access to justice for Ontarians. Along with running her firm, Page Paralegal, Elaine is also the owner of Prep Network, a company dedicated to tutoring paralegal candidates navigating the licensing process. Next is Stephen Parker, who is the president of the Ontario Paralegal Association and has over 30 years' experience in the profession. Stephen has worked in conjunction with the Law Society and the Ministry of the Attorney General for nearly 10 years to make paralegal regulation a reality. Stephen has also instructed at Sheridan College, teaching provincial offenses and motor vehicle law. He is very active in presenting continuing professional development seminars to paralegals and is currently a sole practitioner based in Brampton. Welcome, Stephen. And lastly, Laurie Marshall is a director of the Ontario Paralegal Association and a partner at Marmac Legal and Immigration. She has over 25 years' experience as a licensed paralegal and teaches at Durham College in the Law Society accredited paralegal program and graduate certificate programs. And you heard today what other adventures she'll be going forward with. So let's start off with an overview of the profession. So Elaine, can you tell us what paralegals do and what the role they play in the sector to access to justice champions?
With pleasure. Thank you, Cathy. As Cathy said, I'm a very proud supporter of paralegals because I think we do incredible work for the community. So I know there's a lot of students in the room, so you already know, but for the people who don't know, we have a wide berth in terms of the areas of law with which we can practice. Some of the more popular ones are, of course, small claims court, landlord and tenant, highway traffic, certain criminal, WSIB. Anytime there's a social housing tribunal, including human rights, we are allowed to appear there. And we have certainly made our mark. If you go into those tribunals, you will see that primarily the people doing the representation are paralegals versus lawyers. And there's a lot of reasons for that, in mostly that the paralegal community has really latched onto the social aspects of the profession and have this idealism about really wanting to help the people of Ontario. And so they gravitate. I mean, yes, of course, it's a money proposition as well. I have to admit that. But we tend to gravitate to the areas of law where the people who really need the most hands-on help are there, and we can help those people.
So Elaine, what type of work do you solely practice in?
Primarily, I do small claims court and landlord and tenant. And in the landlord and tenant arena, I have to admit that most of my clients are landlords, and there's a whole bunch of reasons for that. But of late, I have been taking on a lot of tenants who have been caught up in big landlords who have been trying to force them out because their rents are low and that sort of case. And so that's my area. And in small claims court, I do plaintiff work, which is I sue a whole variety. I have a general practice, a whole variety of cases, and I defend as well. And so that can be anything from a contract that's not been paid, a dog bite. I mean, it's just such a wide variety. A real estate transaction that has gone awry and there's damages that flow from that. There's a wide variety of cases that we can do and that I do as a small claims court practitioner.
Stephen, what type of practice do you have, and where do you get your clients from?
I practice exclusively, excuse me, recovering from a cold, exclusively in the provincial offences courts. In the early days, I did a little bit of small claims court work, but I found, together with the provincial offences work, it was becoming too time-consuming, where you could go to a hearing on a small claims matter and be told to come back the next day, whereas you've already got traffic matters to deal with, and it was just hell. So I thought, rather than be jack of all trades and master of none, let's concentrate, do something well and move on, and concentrate purely on provincial offences.
And most of your clients are individual public?
I'm sorry?
Most of your clients are the individual public?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Laurie, what type of work do you practice in?
Previously, I practiced almost extensively landlord-tenant small claims court. Over the years, I have kind of very, very diverse client base now, and in part because of access to justice. Some of those clients are human rights, and I represent at the Human Rights Tribunal of Ontario and federally, and immigration clients within the paralegal scope.
So with this context in mind, I'd like to reflect a bit on the history of paralegal regulation. Stephen, the Law Society has regulated paralegals for 10 years. How have we evolved to access to justice champions?
Thanks, Cathy. Well, I think in the past, some in the legal community have looked at us more as pirates of the Caribbean than helping people or helping the profession. But now we're being seen as defenders of some of the most vulnerable members of the community. My own view, education is the key. The Paralegal Standing Committee was created when the Law Society Act was amended back in 2006. At that time, I was appointed by the then Attorney General, Michael Bryant, to that committee, and worked with Michelle Haig, who is the current chair of the Paralegal Standing Committee. At that point, we were given just 6 months to put together all the regulations, the exemptions, the rules of conduct, and the educational competencies and requirements, and the grandparenting provisions. This resulted in the first round of licensing examinations that focused purely on ethics, professionalism, and practice management. Excuse me. It became clear that this was not enough. And so in 2013, work started on raising the bar to include substantive content that lengthened the exam from 3 hours to the current 7. So after my stint on the Paralegal Committee, excuse me, I've lost a page. Never mind, I'll wing it. The committee had to decide, or the working group had to decide on how the exam was going to be developed. The core competencies had to be determined. There was a finite number of questions that were going to be asked, as there was in the original exam. And so it became a balancing act to decide how many questions would be asked on any given subject. And the more questions we wanted to ask on one, fewer questions had to be asked in another area. However, we worked it out, and from the competencies that we developed, the questions were written, and the result is the exam that is currently in place that was first held in the summer of 2015. I see there are a number of students here, so you have me to partially blame for what you're going to be put through.
But I can help you through it.
Segue.
Thanks, Stephen.
Lawyer opposition to what we do has noticeably diminished over the years. Several county law associations now welcome paralegals. And even one has, or at least had, a paralegal as its treasurer. If that's not progress, I don't know what is. And basically, my line of thinking was who'd have thunk it 10 years ago that this would have happened. Many lawyers are still concerned over the expansion of our scope of practice. You know, to hear from others that paralegals should be able to represent clients in what are currently off-limit areas, most noticeably, of course, family law. But I'm optimistic that the opposition will change. I've heard from lawyers that there is room for paralegals in such areas as family law. This is where the Boncallo report comes in, The Law Society is working with the government to put together an educational plan which the Attorney General wants to see in place, or something in place, by this fall, but don't expect, to be honest, that somebody's going to be told that you can now do family law. By the time everything comes into place, I would imagine a good 3 to 4 years, or maybe a little more, but be patient, it will happen. But again, education is the key. I think the respect that has been afforded paralegals is now very obvious in both the courts and the tribunals. There's still the thorny issue of paralegals being considered officers of the court. This is currently being addressed, and I feel sure that it will soon be a done deal. I've had a conversation with the Law Society. They are working on our behalf to sort this out. And again, hopefully it won't be too long. More paralegals are successfully working in the human rights field, WSIB and landlord and tenant tribunals, as we've heard. There are also a few paralegals representing other paralegals and paralegal candidates at the Law Society tribunal hearings. That's something I'm sure a few years ago you wouldn't think. There'd be a paralegal being able to represent a candidate or a discipline hearing within the Law Society, but they have paralegal discipline, or discipline paralegals as they're called, who are prosecuting these cases, and conversely, paralegals are representing and defending those persons. Paralegals are part of the Paralegals referral, or the Law Society referral service, something that once you're licensed you may be interested in getting involved in. However, there are some Crown attorneys that have still refused to have paralegals in their criminal courts. It took an application before a judge for one paralegal in the GTA to be permitted to represent an accused, and he successfully had his client found not guilty after a trial, even though the Crown was adamant that this person, there wasn't going to be a paralegal in his courts. And this got to the point where, in fact, a formal complaint has been filed with the Law Society over this Crown attorney's conduct. But despite the position of some Crown attorneys, Legal Aid Ontario has a number of paralegals working with duty counsel in 4 criminal courthouses around the province. I'll read you an excerpt from a news release from the Legal Aid Ontario from August of 2014. For the past 7 months, a select group of 5 paralegals has been part of an LAO study examining how interprofessional teams of lawyers, paralegals and legal aid workers can work together to provide clients with better, more cost-effective services. This was written by Kirsty Mathers McHenry, Director of Strategic Initiatives and Planning. She's also quoted as, "We are thrilled to support our staff paralegals as they expand their role. The 5 paralegals participating in the study exhibit a strong commitment to access to justice and are making contributions both to their local teams and to the development of LAO's paralegal capacity." Quite something. The paralegals participating in the study have been matched with lawyer mentors who support their development and have completed training on criminal law and the paralegal scope of practice. These paralegals have participated in unique exercises to ensure the quality of services clients are receiving. As expected, these paralegals, who were selected for their suitability to take on these expanded roles, are delivering high-quality services that meet or exceed LAO's expectations for our staff. The fact that we have more options to meet the needs of our clients is a tribute to the training these paralegals have received, their understanding of our clients' needs, and their ability to contribute to their teams. Working under the direct supervision of a lawyer, the paralegals participating in the study are now providing clients with legal advice and diversion services, and in Ottawa, our most experienced paralegal will be providing services to clients on pleas, among other duties. This study has demonstrated that LAO paralegals, working within their scope of practice, can provide clients with quality legal assistance. That's a quote from David McKillop, who's Vice President of Policy, Research and External Relations with the Law Association. Sorry, Legal Aid. Try that again. Legal Aid. He continues, paralegals are licensed by the Law Society of Upper Canada And so it only makes sense that LAO include them in our service mix to provide clients with faster access to immediate frontline legal help. These positive comments were reinforced in April last year with another news release, where David McKillop reiterated, "We are thrilled about the study's results. They show that with the proper support and mentorship, licensed paralegals can thrive alongside duty counsel, providing client-centered and cost-effective services as part of an interdisciplinary team. As a result, paralegals can provide our clients with more comprehensive services, our managers with more options for staffing, and our duty counsel with more time to work with clients on complex matters." Could anyone foresee that that sort of comment and accolade would have been distributed 10 years ago? Paralegals also work with Legal Aid Ontario at immigration refugee hearings. Again, some issues are taking longer to resolve than I would like, but it's not from the lack of support of and intervention by the Law Society. Well before regulation, in the general discussion stages with the Attorney General's office, excuse me, it was agreed that licensed paralegals would be commissioners for taking affidavits. However, the first licensees had to pay $75 for a 3-year commission and then had to renew. Despite the Law Society's intervention on our behalf, it took the government 5 years to amend the regulations under the Commissioners for Taking Affidavits Act to include paralegals as commissioners by virtue of office. So it's not your representative, if you will, from the Paralegal Association. It's not the Law Society or anyone else that's holding back these initiatives. It's purely the government moving their very slow, grinding, rusty wheels. The issue of paralegals being notaries is still in discussion, and hopefully, again, will be resolved soon. These 10 years have flown by in the blink of an eye. We will continue to see more evolution than revolution in the next 10, but they should be just as exciting for the professionals. Thank you.
So what's interesting, Stephen, is in 10 years of regulation, we're now over 8,000 paralegals being regulated. Almost 1,000 were licensed last year. And I remember when we were grandparented in, I think there might have been 800 that got licensed 10 years ago. So the profession has really grown. As my role as a bencher, I appear at the new licensee reception for any of the students who are any paralegals in the audience who have probably attended or should attend when you get licensed. And the change that I've seen, because I always ask the paralegals, how have you found a job? What are you doing? And almost this past reception, almost 90% of them all had employment in law firms. And I saw that as a real positive change because I think now law firms are seeing the access to justice that paralegals can provide to their clients. So I think that's a really good switch that has gone on. And yeah.
And on that note, to do with the reception, how many of you here are taking your exams this year, in October, or we don't know yet? No? There's usually a reception around April, which will be 10 years from when the first licenses were issued in March of 2008. I have approached the Law Society to see if they can maybe do a little something extra for that new licensee reception. I've already spoken to Michael Bryant, and he is prepared, if he's free, and given him enough time, notice, would be prepared to come along and say a few words on that. I think very important 10th anniversary of the first licensees. So if you're hopefully ready and good to go by next April, please come along. It's free food.
Butter tarts. So just thinking about something that was said around the law firms, Cathy, is that my experience, I've been doing this a really long time, and I would, in the early days, I'd call a firm and I was treated with not always the most amount of respect. because I was just a paralegal. And one of the things that I have noticed, and it is a significant change, is that when we do contact firms, if they're on the other side of a file, there's a whole different level of respect. We're treated, for the most part, as colleagues now, and not some, political, like riffraff who's trying to steal their jobs. I mean, there was a lot of nasty stuff in the early years, and I feel like it's changed significantly, and you probably have experienced that as well.
Yeah, we have a lot of lawyer advocates for us.
Yeah.
More and more each year, we're finding.
And I have a lot of clients that are lawyers who refer me their work because they're usually, paralegals, the work that most of us do, most law firms don't provide representation, and I do landlord and tenant, and sometimes you'll see the odd lawyer there, but mostly it's self-reps or paralegals. And the one thing I want to talk about also about the regulation 10 years ago, there was when the government decided that paralegals should be regulated. It was based on, in August 1999, the Ontario Court of Appeal had commented on the following case. I'm sure Stephen's Romanovitz.
Yeah.
And basically what it says is a person who decides to sell T-shirts on the sidewalk needs a license and is subject to government regulation. That same person can, however, without any form of government regulation, represent a person in a complicated criminal case. Unregulated representation by agents who are not required to have any particular training or ability in complex and difficult criminal proceedings where a person's liberty and livelihood are at stake invites miscarriage of justice. So, it was crazy. People say, how do you become a paralegal? Back then, you just said, I'm a paralegal without any training. And so, to quote the expression, we've come a long way, baby. We really have, and it's been very positive, I think, and I think it's helping the people of Ontario and giving our profession the professionalism that it deserves. So building on that discussion and Stephanie's presentation, let's look forward to what's going on in the future. Laurie, what does the next decade look like for paralegals as access to justice champions in their community?
Okay, I did prepare a few notes, and they aren't all to paralegal students, paralegal graduates, and paralegals. They are also to, I understand we have a number of stakeholders, people who can educate the public on what paralegals do. And the next decade, it's absolutely imperative that paralegals, the Law Society, the Ontario Paralegal Association, librarians, members of Parliament, members of provincial Parliament, municipal councillors, they educate everybody on what we can do, because people are denied access to justice because they don't know we exist. They don't know what our scope is. So for the next decade, I am positive we will see it because we have come so far. So a few things. In March of 2017, when the Boncala report regarding family law was released, I joined the board of directors of the Ontario Paralegal Association. Back in 1996, I was on the education committee of the Paralegal Society of Ontario. And I was involved in that for 2 years, and I left. I left all paralegal politics for 19 years because there was the Paralegal Society of Ontario, the Licensed Paralegal Association, the Professional Paralegal Association of Ontario, the Paralegal Society of Canada. Anyone who wasn't happy in one of the paralegal associations made another one. And a huge move 3 years ago, Stephen? Was it 3 years ago?
November 2014.
Okay, November 2014, we finally merged the two last surviving paralegal associations, Society an association, to the Ontario Paralegal Association. And I said, I became a member immediately in order to support the association. I believe numbers are imperative. And I said, it'll probably take 10 years. It's a new profession, and the association will take 10 years to work out the kinks. I am absolutely flabbergasted and pleasantly surprised at the diversity on the board of directors of the Ontario Paralegal Association. The volunteers who put in hours on committees for education, regulatory events, it is absolutely astounding. And as the bar is raised, and as paralegals join this one association and come together, including students, the public will gain knowledge and they will gain confidence in the paralegal field. In gaining knowledge and confidence, like the hub, okay, a lot of people in Durham region didn't know what paralegals do. As the immigration paralegal on Mondays, I am booked 5 to 6 weeks in advance with clients. Every restorative justice nonprofit, every women's shelter, all the nonprofits, libraries, churches, they have all gained a new understanding of what paralegals do because of that initiative. And that is part of my, I think I'm in my last probably 10 years of the profession, and my goal is for the public to know what we do and for paralegals to have a very carved out role in providing access to justice. Stephen outlined the legal aid involvement. I believe that paralegals will have more involvement with legal aid because of the success of the criminal and the immigration pilots. I believe that paralegals will have increased involvement in the courts, and including the Immigration and Refugee Board. The Immigration and Refugee Board this year solicited paralegals and awarded contracts to paralegals to operate as designated representatives at the Refugee Board for underage and mentally incompetent refugee applicants. I teach with one of the designated representatives at the Refugee Board at Durham College. This is an extreme success because in the past, only lawyers have been able to be designated representatives of minors, children, mentally incompetent, and so on. So the Immigration and Refugee Board soliciting paralegals specifically for that role is extremely encouraging. Okay, summary advice. I hope all the legal aid clinics are expanding like the Durham Community Legal Clinic, because the passion at that clinic, we have 9 paralegals, and they work in small claims court, Workers' Safety Insurance Board, the Disability Tribunal, Criminal Injuries Compensation Board, and they support not only Durham College, but other colleges in offering field placements to students to gain that experience. Most recently, Small Claims Court. I think there will be continued involvement in the Landlord-Tenant Board. Paralegals currently hold positions as duty counsel at the Landlord-Tenant Board, and I can see that increasing as the need for access to justice for tenants increase, and as Stephanie Ball outlined, precarious employment and people who cannot afford representation. I think that paralegals will gain increased scope. I have been involved in the Government Relations Committee of the Ontario Paralegal Association and involved in many meetings at the Law Society, introductory conversations. I've been involved with the submissions in support of paralegals in family law and expanded scope in immigration that came up in June of 2017, surprisingly. Not that I am confident we will get increased scope, but by keeping our scope in that field, I believe that in the next, the question was 10 years, I do believe in the next 10 years that paralegals will gain increased scope. I am hoping that by the colleges learning about Durham College's initiatives and partnerships with the legal clinic, that other colleges will partner with their local legal clinics, because every single municipality in Ontario has a legal clinic. So every college should be providing paralegal students on field placement as part of their roles and their requirements the Law Society has for them at the legal clinics for field placements. And the students, they learn so much. I believe that there will be expanded paralegal experience in education now that there is a longer exam. It was proposed that that exam would come after 5 years. It was a year or two late, but it came, and now that that exam is here and the bar is being raised, I do believe that there will be growth in the scope. The Coach and Advisor Network with the Law Society, many paralegals volunteer as a coach or advisor to paralegals, including myself. I believe there will be growth in the Coach and Advisor Network of the Law Society. I just spoke to one of the managers, and he said he was more than willing, and it was within his scope, to come out to the colleges and speak to the students about the Coach and Advisor Network and how upon graduation and licensing, students can receive mentoring from paralegals in the paralegal community as part of that. So I'm going to have them into my classes in the new year. I believe that the Ontario Paralegal Association is gaining respect and is a strong voice for paralegals with the Law Society and with the government. And because there is diversity, I hope that grows. And lastly, I do believe there will be expansion of continuing professional development seminars. Durham College now with our global classroom, we webcast them. The Ontario Paralegal Association, they webcast them. The Law Society has specific requirements for webcasting, and this is not an easy thing to do. Going in person provides incredible networking opportunities, and I've had students who gain field placements, graduates who gain employment from professional development, and I believe that our profession is going to gain more respect for professional development and what it means for us. Finally, I really hope that the public and paralegals learn that there is paralegal scope outside Workers' Safety Insurance Board, human rights, small claims court, provincial offenses, immigration, criminal, landlord-tenant. I hope that we see lots of paralegals at the License Appeals Tribunal, that we start seeing paralegals specializing at the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, that paralegals are representing at the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board. These are areas that paralegals need to represent in, and people need their assistance. And finally, the Assessment Review Board. Durham College has extreme participation from paralegal students and graduates in that professional development seminar every May. And every year, we have approximately between 6 and 8 participants who are hired by MPAC in paralegal positions. However, we also have a few that start representing at the Assessment Review Board for corporations and for people, members of the public, for their municipal property assessments. There are over probably 100 tribunals in Ontario. Paralegals have scope. They are allowed to represent, and they need to represent, because people need the representation. So over the next decade, I don't know whether it will happen, but I really hope that paralegals, through expansion in these areas, educate the public on what we do.
Thank you. I also wanted to mention the Law Society Referral Service. I know I'm not sure if anyone in the audience are just members of the public or on the webcast, or for any professional that's in the room. The Law Society Referral Service is you can join. It's a part of a service offered by the Law Society. So if you're a paralegal or a lawyer, you can join and offer your services. Or if you're a member of the public, you go online, and it's www.findlegalhelp.ca, but it's on the Law Society website, and it'll match you up with a lawyer or a paralegal for any legal services that you require. You get 30 minutes free advice. It's a great way to the paralegal students and paralegals that are listening in. It's a great way to get clients. It's a great way for the public to find out what a paralegal can do. And even if they don't hire you, they can tell their friend they have met a paralegal and this is what they can help you with. So I encourage everyone to look into that. It's a very inexpensive program to join, and it's a great one for lawyers, paralegals, and the public, and to get matched together. I think most of the public would have a paralegal represent them in one time in their life, because it's where you live. It's someone hit your car, or it's I got a traffic ticket. Not that I would ever get a traffic ticket, that sort of thing. So it's a great it's a great opportunity for the public to get access to justice. And speaking about a diverse group of people, I mean, I find that paralegals are going to these receptions are quite diverse. Most of them are on their second or third career, and experienced in other areas, and have now gone into that tribunal so that they are an expert in that area. I don't know if anyone else has any comments on that topic.
Talking of second or third careers, this is my third career, albeit now it's gone on more than 30 years, so I think I found my niche by now. I started off, believe it or not, in England as a travel agent. After I left school, then I became a police officer in England, and then 10 years here, and I left the police to start doing this, and as I say, that was over 30 years ago. I have to say that these 30 years have gone a hell of a lot quicker than the 10 years I was a police officer. And you're learning something every day. You never stop learning, and that's part of the fun. Sorry.
For me, it's around the wealth of experience that I get to have on a daily basis, so thousands of people that I have met over the years. So there's two things to that. First of all, people don't realize that a paralegal who is an active, has a healthy practice, can do 10 or 15 hearings in a day, which is an astronomical amount. If you're in a board or a tribunal, I don't think you could do that many small claims court trials in a day, but you certainly, and I have done, in a small claims court setting, I've done 8 settlement conferences in a row in a single day, which is a tremendous amount. But the reason I say that is important is often our colleagues who are lawyers actually only get to go to court and argue a trial once or twice a year to do a full-out trial, whereas a number of paralegals are doing trials, full-out trials, on a weekly basis. And there's much more, if you're the kind of person who likes to be in court, there's much more opportunity to actually be in court as a paralegal, but also in terms of access to justice. The people of Ontario can be reassured excuse me, that if they hire a paralegal to do a job, that they have significant experience, which is really important, and sometimes more experience in particular areas of law than perhaps a lawyer. And I don't say that to disparage lawyers. Some of my best friends are lawyers. It's just that we have different practices. I wanted to just share something, if I may, about one of the reasons that I'm passionate about this profession. I am a people person, and I like to solve problems. And so the profession allows me to do both. And it's the hands-on, and I'm sure my colleagues would agree with me on this. It's the hands-on work that you do with your clients that really makes it worthwhile. And as a sample of that, I recently had a case with a woman who was referred to me from a lawyer, and she really didn't have any money, and she was about to be evicted because she allegedly owed $29,000 in arrears. She'd been in the property with her family for 10 years. And I was rather shocked at the amount of arrears. So I took on the file, and I got to know her and her family and discovered that there was a problem with the way the landlord had been managing the property, including illegally renting the increasing the rent, dating back to 2006. And so not only was I able to knock out all of those arrears, but she actually had her rent reduced to the rate of 2006. And then there was ongoing maintenance issues that were rather severe, and those got fixed too. So like that's a true success story. And that's one of thousands and thousands. My colleagues here we could share war stories all day long. But the point that I'm trying to make is that because we have that ability to work closely with people and really understand what it is that they need and then apply the law to that, we can be such a force to be reckoned with in terms of access to justice for the people of Ontario if they decide that maybe they should give us a shot.
Thanks, Elaine. I'm going to ask my fellow panel members about job satisfaction. What keeps you passionate about this profession?
The fact that you're learning something every day. But you only learn something if you take the time and effort to do it. I go on Canly at least twice a day to see what else has been posted. You may see something in the morning and there'll be more stuff added in the afternoon. It's the same with other research programs. But you've got to take the time and effort to do it, and that's how you get ahead of your game, get ahead of in your field. Excuse me. As Elaine says about helping people, when I was a police officer, I used to hear from colleagues that they joined the police to help people. You may have heard that through the news media or whatever. But in 15 years of policing, I can honestly say that I really only helped 2 families or 2 people. However, in 30 years of doing this, it's not often you get hugged as a police officer for doing something. Right. But certainly when you win a case, yeah, the client thanks you, hugs you, brings you bottles of things, which you certainly don't do as a police, at least not officially. But
rules of conduct.
Well, yeah. But yes, you certainly get the appreciation of the people that you've been helping. Certainly.
Laurie, do you have anything to add on that?
Variety. Every single day I'm doing something different. Even outside my teaching. Yesterday, I worked on a Workers' Safety Insurance Board case, a brand new client with my partner. A human rights claim that it's joint clients, and one of them is very, very unique, and it's so unique I can't give I can't even give the basis for the claim except to say it's gender expression, and it will probably be a precedent because there's, believe me, nothing. I've had to hire researchers, and I'm still researching. So there's something new every day, and then I have colleagues phone, oh, have you ever heard of this? And can you help me out with this? So it's something new every single day.
So if I can just jump on board for a second with what you were talking about, one of the things that I'm really passionate about with respect to the, job satisfaction is this idea that we actually have the ability to form, have some kind of input as to how society forms in the future. So when you talk about arguing a precedent-setting case that may change how one views a particular area of law for years to come, that's incredibly, and hopefully for the better. Oh, yeah. It's not always for the better. So when you're able to do that, or when had the privilege, as we all have had, working on committees to help shape justice in the future, that's incredibly satisfying that long after I've retired, that legacy of the work we started back in 2005 and 6 will carry on for future generations, and that to me is incredible. And I say that because of my colleagues. We've been working together a long time, and for new people, we've only just cracked open the door. Think about all of the possibilities of the future that you can change by doing this kind of work.
And I think because you spend a lot of time sitting in the courts, and I appear solely at the Landlord and Tenant Tribunal, and most people are unrepresented, and you're sitting there waiting, and you hear someone who's unrepresented, and you're in the back going, no, don't do that. If you do that, you're going to have to start all over. That's not what you want. I mean, inside my head, I say that. But, sometimes I'll go outside later and say, look, you should be doing this form. And because, they make, for example, a termination notice for arrears, 1 day late, and the case is thrown out, and a member of the public doesn't understand, but they owe the money, and so I think you get that satisfaction where you can help someone through that process, because it can be a really intimidated process if you've never been in a courtroom before, and if there's a language barrier, I
would like to add, though, that I don't know how many of you are interested in just moving into the provincial offences arena, but over the years, and to my mind, it's gotten worse, that the lack of trials, in fact, that I see young paralegals doing in traffic court, it seems to be nothing but plea court. You don't get the experience, and then the time's going to come when a prosecutor says, no, I'm not dealing this, it's going to be a trial. And I've seen it before. They go into not a mild state of panic, but a hyper state of panic. What do I do now? I tell students, for those that are familiar with the series, the old TV series Happy Days. Yeah, I know. I'm dating myself. But I see, looking in the audience here, I'm sure there are some in here that would know.
Everyone knows how.
Yeah. Everyone. But the characters of Fonzie and Richie, I remember there was one episode where, excuse me, Richie asks the Fonz how he got his reputation for being a tough guy, when, of course, in the actual show, you never see any of that, but everyone considers him to be a tough guy. And he says to Richie, Little Richie, I think his name was, where we referred to, that at some point you have to have hit somebody. In our arena, that means you're going to have to show them that you're capable of doing your job. By having a trial, you may not win the first one, you may not win the second, but it shows the prosecution side that you're capable of doing a trial. And that's how you get the respect. Not by saying, oh, come on, give me a deal. Oh, why not? That sort of thing. The other thing that really gets up my nose is when I see paralegals coming before the court, introducing themselves as agent. We worked long and hard, or I did anyway, on the original Paralegal Standing Committee where every reference to the term agent was removed from every provincial piece of legislation. Now, you can act as agent for another paralegal, but more often than not, they're there for acting for their own clients, and they're still saying that they're agent for their client or for the person standing next to them. You're not. And I really want to stand up and give them a smack up the side of the head.
I'm glad you don't, Stephen.
No, but what I have done, and again, it comes with experience, I wouldn't recommend necessarily a brand new licensee doing it, but when I occasionally go to a place where I've never been before, and the Justice of the Peace or the clerk says, I just introduce myself representing Mr. Smith. And they say, are you counsel or agent? And I say, neither. Well, that stops everything. The pens stop in mid-stroke. And they look up. And I say, no, I'm a paralegal licensed by the Law Society. Oh, yes, of course, yes. And they say, right? Get the message across. You're not an agent. You're not a counsel. And you could use the military term, no, I work for a living, instead of, counsel. But that's how you get your reputation and the respect. By standing your ground, doing trials, and don't be afraid to lose. I always tell students, we never lose. Our clients sometimes get convicted, but we never lose. It's not our license that's at stake. So don't be afraid. That's all I have to say on that.
So we're a couple of minutes early. So now we're going to take some questions, and I'm hoping that everyone's jumping up. That's what I like to see. Okay, go ahead. Just go up to the mics. Anyone in the audience who has a question? Yes.
Hi, my name's Marion. I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing for about 21 years. And I hope you don't mind if I just comment that everyone in this audience and watching, and I include the legal profession, both lawyers and paralegals, really owes you a great debt. And I wish to just say thank you and congratulations on the 10th anniversary. It's really remarkable.
Well, thank you very much.
That's very nice.
I've been practicing education law for about 20 years, and I'm just wondering, your focus has been on appearing before tribunals and litigation in general, as well as obtaining entitlements, etc. My question, I expect, applies to a number of areas of law where, like in education law, where, for example, parents or students are not able to access legal assistance very easily, but they don't necessarily have to go to a human rights complaint. They need help navigating the system with the school board. I'm not clear if that is something a paralegal can do.
They come under mediation or arbitration. Is that what you're talking about? Mediation and arbitration?
Not even that formal. They need advice or assistance to represent them with dealing with representatives of the school board.
Like a patient advocate sort of thing, as you
Yes,
would in a hospital.
it could be in a hospital context
Yeah.
as well. But yes, of course, I'm most familiar with the school or school board context.
Paralegals may represent any person if it may become part of a proceeding. So I'd need a little bit more detail, but to be a supportive advocate to someone, and I can give an example, the Child and Family Services Tribunal, okay, to work with a parent who may have a proceeding there. Yes, you may, because it may be part of that proceeding. Yeah, that's the wording. It's very, very particular, and we are right here, so we have to be bang on.
Thank you for the question. Next.
You're tall. I was going to do that. I have a question about money, about representing tenants in the landlord-tenant tribunal. I live on the Danforth, and going to community events, I see there's a lot of tenants with a lot of problems, specifically with above guideline increases. So that's something I'm very interested in working in for tenants, not for landlords. And I recognize the reason that doesn't happen a lot is because tenants don't have as much money as landlords. So I'm wondering, how do you represent tenants and in general clients who don't have that much money while paying your own rent, if it makes sense?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and you're absolutely right. The business of landlord and tenant tends to be that the landlords have the money and the tenants don't. So for me, as I said, I just started doing some tenant work, and I assess it. I mean, certainly having a trust account helps, you know, because you're not chasing money. That's a piece of it. But I also assess it. I need to know from my own integrity that the person, whether it be a landlord or a tenant, is coming to me with clean hands. If they want me to use my expertise to rip someone off, and that goes either way, I have zero interest in participating in anything like that. I mean, just because I might know how to do something doesn't mean I should. So if you want to represent tenants, there's certainly a desperate need for good representation. The legal clinics are set up at the boards, but they are very limited in terms of what they can offer, and as well the legal clinics outside of the board are very taxed in terms of ability. So it becomes an issue for you in terms of how you might want to set up your business. And you can work on a contingency, you can work with a small retainer if you want to do Aggies, which are above guideline increases. You can take a small amount of money up front from, you know, a 200 unit. If you take $5 from every tenant in a 200 unit building, it's not taxing on them, and it covers your bill potentially. So there are ways to do it. It's hard to come up with a good business model for it, I'll grant you that.
So there is a way to combine multiple tenants into one
Absolutely.
claim against, I
Yep.
guess.
You have a joint retainer agreement with, if you were doing that, if you wanted to represent 30 or 40 tenants, you could do a joint retainer agreement with all of those people and figure out who's going to be the vocal ones and give you instructions and navigate all of the rules that the Law Society requires around confidentiality and conflicts. And yes, you can absolutely do it, and I would encourage you to.
Thank
It's
you.
needed. I'd like to add to that, too. There is, I mean, I get calls a lot from tenants, and I do some tenant work, mostly corporate landlords, so then it becomes a problem when the tenant calls me and it happens to be my client, and so immediately I have to. So I think there's a large uptake to paralegal representing tenants, and there's nothing to say that just because you're a tenant you can't pay a bill. Like, exactly. There's a lot of tenants who pay rent a lot more than I would, so I think it's a good business to get into. And once you get to know the landlord agents, they can refer you those calls that we get, and sign up for the Law Society referral service.
Yeah, that sounds. Thank you.
Michael.
Yeah, so I just maybe get the panel's comments. I think we'd all agree that the paralegal profession is not new. It's regulations that's new. But what I'm seeing is a lot of the old guard have a lot of practical experience. The new people coming in have a lot of academic experience. So how do you see the profession kind of transferring a lot of that practical experience and combining that with the academic as we move forward in, as Laurie said, the next 10 years?
For me, it's the practicums, the 160 hours. 120 hours. I'm always really impressed with the students who come to me and start quoting case law, because sometimes I know what the case, I don't know it as well as them, and I've been doing it a long time. So there has to be a marriage of the old guard and the new.
Speak for yourself.
Well, since I marry people, I get to debt, right. And I think what will happen as the years flow through, that the training that the new paralegals are getting is going to really come forward, and it's experience. I mean, To answer your question truthfully, I mean, lawyers have been in business for a lot longer than us, and they have the same issue where if people fresh out of law school, just past the bar, and they don't have experience, and it just takes time to learn it.
And Michael, you're going to find this hub. I know there's not a lot of time to focus on this global classroom, but one part of this hub for the Durham Community Legal Clinic is offering, and I have an inside track on this, offering education to all of the community legal clinics in Ontario. They are going to catch on if the colleges do not push it, and I don't know why. I know there are colleges all over Ontario that are not saying, we have students available for field placements. And I know 2 clinics that get funding because those students are available, and then a new paralegal can be hired. So this is going to happen. And like I said, in the next decade, it will happen. It will happen through education. And once that education and knowledge is out there, that the funding is available and the experience is it's gonna grow.
And I think also the coach and advisor network is where this is going to come into its own on that very point.
I also like to say to students or new licensees, you don't start to create yourself the day you get your license. You start to create yourself the day you enrolled in school, and you've got time. You start hanging out at the courthouse. You can learn so much more watching a case. I mean, I still learn, and I've been doing it 40 years, you know. I mean, you learn a lot, and that's where you should be. You should be sitting in that courtroom, and afterwards, if you see a paralegal and you go outside and speak to them, I've never seen a paralegal not answer that question, and a lawyer. I mean, we're talking about paralegals, but that goes for lawyers too. Next question.
My name is Rebecca. I'm a paralegal at YWCA Toronto in landlord and tenant law. And my question has kind of been answered with some of the comments that I'm hearing, but I just wanted to say that, you know, with those, 100+ tribunals that exist in Ontario, as a licensee since 2012, I feel as though I'm still learning about the huge amount, and I feel like if there were more opportunities to expose licensees to those different kinds of tribunals, it would raise awareness between the licensees to to promote interest to go seek education in that area. And also I was wondering if there are specific courses or programs through CPD, education or private programs that as a licensee I can go look up, or where can I go? So that's the first part of my question. And then the second part is just, I feel like licensees have, so much freedom to choose to go in any area that they want, to choose to join any association that they want. And so collectively, I don't think we are coming out from school with that, strength to try and fill this void for access to justice, and finding a way somehow to get, recent graduates to sort of group and, make more noise about this, I think is what will really help push the agenda. And speaking to some other people that have said, how can we get that, clientele that's financially restricted? You have legal aid helping people on OW and ODSP and government assistance and subsidy, but then, the wealthy people are on this end paying for their services. What about the void? And so, that's kind of what I was looking to see is how can we get there?
So in part, I'm a believer in you create your own opportunities. So one of the things that you asked at the very beginning of your question was around this idea of how do we gain experience in these peripheral places that are not sort of the standard that everyone wants to go into. It's quite simple. Go there. Sit in a hearing. Watch. Learn. I mean, we didn't wake up in the morning and suddenly know how to be litigators. We had to learn. So if you have a sense of the list of available avenues with which you could do work, and if something tweaks you that you might be interested in, go if human rights or some other gaming, the excuse me, Alcohol and Gaming Commission, if that interests you, go to a hearing, sit there. So that create the opportunity for yourself is the best piece of advice I can give you. I've learned more in watching than I have in doing.
As far as CPDs are concerned, this is where I'm going to make a plug here for the Ontario Paralegal Association. Part of our membership includes all the CPDs you could ever want, as against a lot of other places where you have to pay for each CPD as you go along. Your membership, annual membership, covers about 30 hours of CPD throughout the year. Get involved.
And it's a great way to mentor, or to meet other paralegals.
Yes,
and,
yeah, network.
Network, that's the word I was looking for.
I
So
just made a note for Ontario Paralegal Association to develop a CPD on various tribunals.
I think that's what's missing. Like, you know, as a student, you learn about the generic areas and tribunals, but you know, the scope is so large that as a recent licensee, you're out there and you're putting your placement and you go to the places where you know, you speak to people, and you know, those grander tribunals that are so outside of our knowledge realm are so far removed that we would have to hear of them in order to go sit there and raise an interest and say, oh, and let me go check that out. And so I think that's, you know, what's missing is educating the new students about there's not only this area, you know, small claims, landlord, and that.
It's not missing. I will tell you, Durham College, the CPDs, we had 10 last year, we have 12 this year, and we cover a plethora of tribunals. Like Cathy said, and Stephen, join the Ontario Paralegal Association. Research where the CPDs are, because after our CPDs, we usually go out and there's networking. You're going to meet people who work in those tribunals. I know a couple right on this side who are in tribunals, and I'm sure they'd be available to mentor. So it's really important, get out there and get in there.
So we have just a couple of more minutes left. So I'm going to take one question off the web, and then you're next, okay? So the one question is there a mandatory mediation process installed in the landlord and tenant tribunal? So I'll answer that since I'm there every day. There's mediators available, but it's not mandatory unless you're my client and I make you go into mediation. I recommend going into mediation, but, you know, and that's another thing you see. I see individuals there, and they're like, no, we've talked about it, we'll never settle this. I get that from my clients too, and I'm like, no, we sit down, we find out what the issue is. Sometimes people just want to talk, and it's all done.
And if you have Cathy on the other side of your file, you really ought to mediate. Just saying.
Go ahead, thank you.
Thank you. Just sort of flowing from that, and just wondering if the panelists could touch, you sort of all talked about your job satisfaction and whatnot. So I'm a long-time practicing workers' comp rep. I work with the Office of the Worker Advisor. I'm currently enjoying a little bit of a break from frontline soldier work over at the OFL right now. But to further to what you said about looking for those opportunities yourself, I'm just wondering though, in the sort of, if you can sort of reflect on the 10 years and where paralegals can find opportunities really to promote and advance access to justice away from doing the frontline soldier work. Because I'll be perfectly honest, when you deal with the WSIB on a day-to-day basis, you get worn down. So I've been lucky to find other opportunities where you still get to be in the cause, so you know, around law reform and things like that, which predominantly over the years have been more in the realm of lawyers. And I'm just curious about the opportunities for paralegals that you may want to speak to, or opportunities that you in your own sort of areas of practice have had with things like law reform committee work and doing those sorts of things to be, again, more behind the scenes, still in the cause, but not necessarily frontline litigation.
Well, Steve, we all have a lot of experience on various boards. So I know for me, the networking component is what gets you there. When you start to be active in things like the Ontario like volunteering your time for events at Ontario Paralegal association when you show up to places like the Law Society and you have a reception and you engage with people. When you volunteer within your own communities, that's what gets your name out there, and that's what allows people to understand that you're passionate about whatever it is you're doing, and that's when you get asked to sit on some of the committees that are changing the world, and they're wonderful. I mean, I had the privilege of sitting on Justice Bancala's advisory committee, and it was the most extraordinary experience. And it's not that I'm so special, it's just that I'm actively involved in the community, and that's the way to do it.
Thank you for your question. So it's 6 o'clock. Time to wrap up. I'd like to thank everyone for attending in person and everyone who is on the web. Thank you for participating in this Access to Justice Week. Special thanks to the organizers of TAG, the Ontario Paralegal Association, Durham College, and the Durham Community Legal Clinic for their efforts, but especially TAG for bringing what us paralegals think is such an important topic, advising the public on what we do, and thank you very much for that. And don't forget to go out and get your pen from Can, the swag you can leave with, and look into the Law Society Referral Service, and everyone have a safe drive home. Thank you.